the wake of Donald Trump's sweeping battleground state victory, the PodSave America bros made a pretty stunning revelation. For Democrats, actually, it could have been so much worse. Here is Jon Favreau.
Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake. It just was. And he and his inner circle, they refused to believe the polls. They refused to believe he was unpopular. They refused to acknowledge until very late that anyone could be upset about inflation, and they just kept telling us that his presidency was historic and it was the greatest economy ever. We just heard him again say that it's the greatest economy ever. Clearly, 70–80% of voters don't believe that. They don't believe that about their own personal financial situation, but they just keep telling us that. And then after the debate, the Biden people told us that the polls were fine, and Biden was still the strongest candidate. They were privately telling reporters at the time that Kamala Harris couldn't win. So they were shivving Kamala Harris to reporters while they told everyone else, not a time for an open process, and his vice president can't win, so he's the strongest candidate. Then we find out, when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign, that the Biden campaign's own internal polling, at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate, showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes. That's what their own internal polling said.
400 electoral college votes. Do you understand what that looks like? With the actual results, Dems took a real shellacking, losing the Senate, almost certainly failing to win back the House, but they kept it close enough that they probably lived to fight another day. A Joe Biden 400 electoral college vote defeat means Republicans at or close to a filibuster-proof supermajority in the Senate, a gigantic margin in the House. It means the Democratic Party completely burned to ashes with nothing but a post-apocalyptic landscape remaining. The mandate and the power of Trump's Republican Party would be unmatched, not even close, in modern politics. After all, Reagan still had to contend with the Democratic House, even as he notched landslide electoral college victories. The 400 electoral college vote revelation is important, though, for a number of reasons. First of all, obviously, an indictment of Joe Biden himself, whose legacy is now genocide plus ushering an unrestrained Trump back into the White House. The arrogance and delusion of this man is truly stunning. It's also, clearly, an absolute indictment of every single party official and elite who circled the wagons to keep Joe Biden in the race and to prohibit any sort of real Democratic primary. You people claimed you thought Trump was an existential threat. You sure as shit didn't act like it, did you? Instead, you marched delusionally forward, claiming the president in a clear state of advanced decline was really a secret political genius. But this alternative timeline, 400 electoral college vote defeat, is also a potential forecast of what could come should the Democratic Party not make a dramatic turn now. Because as bad as this election was, Democrats haven't even come close to hitting rock bottom. Dems saw dramatic shifts against them among Latino men and Gen Z young men in particular. The class divide was quite stark. Harris won voters earning over 100K and Trump won those earning under 100K. Kamala lost ground among voters of color of all education levels. And what's more, there is absolutely no reason to think that any of these shifts and realignments are complete or that Democrats have found their actual floor. It is entirely possible that the 400 electoral college defeat is where the presently constituted Democrats are headed, and fast. Just think about it, pretty simply. Roughly speaking, only about a third of the adult population has college degrees. Massachusetts actually has the highest percent of college grads in the country, and even there, college graduates do not comprise a majority of the adult population. This leads to a pretty simple conclusion. If non-college educated voters continue fleeing the Democratic Party, that party is cooked, relegated to a powerless, permanent minority party status. There is nothing written in law or nature that requires the country to be an evenly divided, roughly 50-50 split. In our own country's history, we can see periods of disproportionate one-party dominance. And no one should fool themselves either about the measures fully empowered Republicans with a stacked Supreme Court would take to ensure that the Democratic Party could never meaningfully, fully compete again. Trump just won on a genuinely anti-democratic message, after all. He literally called for abolishing the Constitution, acting as a dictator on day one. Supreme Court has granted him immunity for all official actions. And Republicans have a clear roadmap to follow in the program of Hungary's Viktor Orban, where he has used the veneer of democracy to successfully permanently entrench his own regime. Before a stunning landslide victory, Orban described how to effectively gain permanent control of a so-called democracy, saying, quote, "It was enough to win just once, but decisively. That was the way." Now, Republicans may be one more cycle with this level of realignment away from winning just such a crushing victory. Now, as the initial shock of Kamala's loss wears off, don't be surprised if the Democratic consultant establishment and donor classes begin to quickly reassert themselves and claim there's no real need for a course correction, let alone a dramatic overhaul. It's already happening, in fact. That's what the Bernie versus Pelosi fight we covered earlier is all about. Just listen to Jim Clyburn, the man most responsible for propping up Biden and putting Kamala on the ticket, saying, there's no point in playing the blame game, right, guys?
I just think that as we take an assessment of all of this, we ought to just chill out for a while, get in touch with each other. Don't worry about blaming anybody. You know what they say, success has 1,000 parents. Failure is an orphan. And so when you're really successful, everybody claims credit. When you come up short, everybody seems to scatter and assign blame. I think that all of us will be taking stock of exactly where we are as a party, what happened in this election, and then go from there. I don't want this election to define how we go about treating candidates of color or candidates who may be women. I think we all just take stock of who and what we are and not get caught up in pointing fingers and assigning blame.
Yes, I'm quite sure that Jim Clyburn does not want finger pointing because a good number of those fingers would be pointed right at him. Absolutely incredible. You're going to hear a lot of it, though. You're going to hear, it wasn't really so bad. Look at the 3 battleground states. Trump only won by a narrow margin, and almost all of the swing state Democrats kept their seats. These types will point to the losses suffered by incumbent parties globally, and they'll say, see, we just were facing really tough headwinds, guys. It wasn't really our fault. They'll offer some limited critiques of some small ball tactics. Hey, Kamala should have gone on with Joe Rogan. They'll invent things completely, like claiming Kamala was too woke when she spent the entire campaign studiously avoiding wokeness. Or they'll blame a singular individual like Biden or Pelosi or Kamala herself, not depending on merit, but depending on their own intra-party tribal affiliations. Now, in a sense, these critiques have merit. It was close in the industrial Midwest after all. I think it is plausible to imagine maybe a Gavin Newsom, maybe Mayor Pete, or even Big Gretch could have pulled off the election victory. The exact place where Dems find themselves today is still in the ballgame enough that it is conceivable some small adjustment could have been sufficient to win this particular election. The current status of the Democratic Party isn't a complete catastrophe. But make no mistake, the long-term trajectory is death. If the trends that the party saw between 2016 and now continue unmitigated, it will be utterly catastrophic in a way that is probably unrecoverable. Now, after Hillary lost in 2016, Democrats had a chance to actually learn some real lessons about their abandonment of working people, to see the writing on the wall about their future electoral prospects. Instead, they chose denial. It was sexism. It was Comey. It was Russia. Hillary herself, self-interested in blame shifting, of course, led the charge. Biden's extremely narrow victory was taken as vindication. But once again, the alarm bells were ringing. The continued shift of Latinos towards Trump, the widening of the education divide, the fact that Biden was barely able to win while Trump was literally getting people killed in the middle of a pandemic. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement for the Democratic Party. Do not underestimate that party's desire and self-interest in once again learning nothing and changing nothing. Just think about it. Kamala's campaign was a multi-billion-dollar industry. Consultants received multi-million-dollar contracts. The checks cash whether those ads worked or not. The DNC, it's a cartel, protects its chosen consultants and allied politicians. CNN and MSNBC exist to carry the establishment party line. It's a racket. And it won't be disrupted by a few establishment types meekly whispering, you know what, guys? Maybe Bernie was right. So for anyone who is left of MAGA, for my libs and my lefties alike, we gotta be crystal clear about a few critical things. Number one, third parties are a waste of frickin' time and energy. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. Ranked choice voting just got beaten even more badly than the Democratic Party in state referendums. I wish it wasn't true. The most credible third-party candidate, Dr. Jill Stein, she got less than 1% of the vote. It wasn't even enough votes for Dems to try to blame her and call her a spoiler. The only electoral vehicle for opposing Trumpism is the Democratic Party. Number two, the Democratic Party itself is in danger of extinction as meaningful opposition. Everyone who's been steering the ship over the past 8 years, they should all be fired. Every brain-dead consultant contract terminated. And crucially, The working class must be put ahead of the party's donors. Senator Chris Murphy, to my surprise, actually got a lot right in a recent tweet thread where he wrote in part, "When progressives like Bernie aggressively go after the elites that hold people down, they are shunned as dangerous populists. Why? Maybe because true economic populism is bad for our high-income base." Yeah, you think? Now look, Trump is done in 4 years' time. His successors don't have nearly the juice that he does, as evidenced by the fact that he outperformed nearly every Republican in the country. Democrats may have kept the margins close enough in the House and the Senate to stay in the game for now, but it is time for a dramatic turnaround, or that 400 electoral college wipeout that Joe Biden was heading for could be just around the next 4-year corner. So, yeah, it's pretty dire for them. And I'm not.
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Krystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.